lived, Ronnie Peterson was a racing driver who earned the nickname Super Swede for his pure, undisputed ability behind the wheel of a Formula One car. With 10 victories and 26 podiums to his name, it is surprising to look back at his career and realise that he never won the World Championship, although he got extremely close on many occasions, most notably in 1978 when his quest for the title sadly took his life. In this video I will be looking back at his career and picking out 15 things that cemented him as a legend of the sport. After a few years of karting, Peterson entered car racing in Swedish Formula 3, but he didn't do it the conventional way. Back in those days, privateers tended to buy a chassis and an engine to go racing, but Ronnie actually co-designed his own car with his father and a man named Sven Andersson. The car was based on a Brabham, had a tiny 1-litre engine, and was known as the Sveeb. Oh yeah, and he used it to win the championship twice. He even went on to win the prestigious Monaco F3 race in '69. Nice! Monaco would prove to be a happy hunting ground for Ronnie in fact, and in 1970 he made his F1 debut there, driving a March entered by Antique Automobiles. He finished 7th, which admittedly was last of the finishers, but in all honesty he did a great job to finish that race amidst the usual Monaco attrition. He then went on to score 2 more top 10 finishes in his debut season, catching the eye of the factory March team. At the following year's Monaco Grand Prix, driving a March with a T-tray wing, Peterson scored his first F1 points and podium with 2nd place, thus establishing himself as a true contender in Formula 1. Peterson got extremely close to his first win several times in 1971, including losing the Italian Grand Prix by just 1/100th of a second. Oof! Despite his failure to win a race, Ronnie's consistent podium finishes were actually enough to put him 2nd in the championship behind a runaway Jackie Stewart. To put this into perspective, Ronnie's factory March teammates scored a grand total of 0 points, while Ronnie was runner-up to the championship. It was becoming undeniable that Peterson was a force to be reckoned with, and surely most people would have called him a future champion. While 1972 was unsuccessful, Ronnie had done enough to catch the eye of Team Lotus, who signed him up for 1973. At the Spanish Grand Prix, Peterson emerged as the clear favourite as he set a stunning lap and put his car on pole position, 7/10ths of a second ahead of anyone else, and almost 2 seconds ahead of his world champion teammate Emerson Fittipaldi. There's a very strong chance that Peterson would have gone on to win the race too, but sadly his gearbox failed while he was leading with just 19 laps to go, and he was forced to concede the win to Emerson. In a race that I actually covered on Random F1 Race Views, the 1973 French Grand Prix, Peterson finally took his first victory after Fittipaldi and Scheckter collided while fighting for the lead. He may have been gifted the lead, but that doesn't mean that he didn't deserve the win, as he'd done an excellent job to keep up with the 2 superstars in the first place, and his 41-second winning margin says a lot. I mentioned previously that Monaco was a happy hunting ground for Ronnie, and in 1974 he won the prestigious Grand Prix by 29 seconds. Winning the Monaco Grand Prix is impressive whenever you do it, but you have to remember that by this time the Lotus team was racing an evolution of their 5-year-old car, the 72. This was Ronnie demonstrating his incredible talent for car control. When Peterson won races, he tended to win big, such as in France in 1974 when he took the lead away from Niki Lauda and went on to win by over 20 seconds. Ignore the crash in the background, that's just James Hunt doing James Hunt things. By 1974, Fittipaldi had left Peterson and joined McLaren, but the two of them maintained a healthy respect and rivalry, as shown at the 1974 Italian Grand Prix, when they ran nose to tail, with Peterson just about holding off the eventual world champion to win by less than a second. The Italian Grand Prix was quite possibly Peterson's strongest event, as he won it 3 times, although this is ironic and tinged with a slight bit of sadness, since it was of course the circuit which would ultimately take his life. Lotus only finished 7th in the Constructors' Championship in 1975, so for 76 Peterson packed his bags and went back to March, where he'd had his first major break. The car was average at best, and ironically finished behind Lotus in the championship, although Ronnie did manage to bag a surprise win at Monza before going back to the midfield for the remainder of the season. He would then have an unsuccessful year with Tyrrell in 1977. Of course, Ronnie is most famous for his 1978 season, and rumours like this are why. Here he is passing Patrick Depailler on the very last lap at Kyalami to win the Grand Prix from 12th on the grid. I'm honestly surprised we don't hear about this race more, because that ending is a thriller, and what a drive it must have been from Ronnie to take this win. In my opinion, Ronnie's greatest win was at the 1978 Austrian Grand Prix, where he mastered the wet conditions to win from pole, finishing 47 seconds ahead of his opponents in a day when only 35% of the starters were classified. It was the Super Swede's only ever hat-trick and his final victory, although no one at the time would have believed it. Statistically, 1978 was by far Ronnie's greatest year, with 2 wins and 7 podiums in total in the legendary ground effect Lotus. He might very well have won the championship too, had his teammate not been the sensational Mario Andretti. Sadly, as I've already mentioned in this video, he would have been a posthumous champion if he'd done it, as he died at the Italian Grand Prix while trying to keep his championship hopes alive. Would he have won if he'd lived? Honestly, looking at the trends of the season, it's doubtful, but if he'd aced the final 2 rounds of the championship, there's definitely a chance. Peterson's fatal accident, of course, reminds us that the 1970s were a tragic and dangerous time for the sport. During Ronnie's 9-year F1 career, 11 drivers died in F1 cars if you include non-championship events, and many more died in sports cars and non-F1 single-seaters. It was statistically the single most dangerous time in history to be a Grand Prix driver, and you had to be a good mix of brave and batty in order to even attempt it, let alone be fast. Ronnie was all of those things, and that's why his bravery by itself is an achievement on this list. Peterson's career came at a time in F1 history that many people look back on as the good old days. It was a highly competitive era with 6 different champions in 9 years, and Ronnie surely made an impression on all of them. Lotus team boss Colin Chapman said that he drove flat out all of the time, and that if he's off the pace, then it might be the car, not him. Sir Jackie Stewart said he'd follow him into a corner and watch him seemingly lose control, but he'd always seem to get it back somehow. Ronnie himself said that there was no such thing as luck, and that the remedies to skidding were the steering wheel and the accelerator. Thank you all for watching this video, drive safely, and I'll see you next time.